Hey guys, happy Monday. Today is Monday, August 5th, 2019. I can't believe it's the first Monday of August. Super excited to have Chris Fio with me on the show. Say hi, Chris.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Fio of the Experience with Chris Fio, and I'm wonderfully excited to be on the TED Show today.
See, hi, Joe Lopez. Jennifer Holt, give us a thumbs up. We got it already that people can hear us and see us. I am excited because it's so nice not to have to coach anybody. He already has his own show, his own experience. I can't wait to hear more about that. And we got to give a shout out to our wonderful, amazing friend, Boris Garbe.
Yes.
He's to the left, and he's the one who introduced us. And Boris is such a beautiful, wonderful, supportive person, and a great friend to the TED Show and to me. So, welcome, Chris. Hey, Joe.
Hey.
So when Boris came to me, I didn't know who you were. You probably didn't know who I was either. Boris is really good about that. And so it's good about the introduction part. Like, you want that. Happy Monday, John. You want to have that introductions because you never know who your next great friend's going to be, great supporter. But people are not here to hear me pontificate about that. They want to know about Chris Fio. So give us a little background on you, my friend.
A little background on me. Before the podcasting, I used to be a musician. I used to play with jazz bands. I was with Freddie G and the Black Elvis, which is a wonderful jazz band.
What did you play?
I played the lead guitar. Before that, I was the rhythm guitarist. I was being trained into jazz because I was originally into blues and rock. So I really figured out how the jazz lines worked. And the singer actually had a radio show, and that's how I got started with my radio career. Was he wanted me to just be an in-house guitarist for his band called Harbinger, and he was out of characters on the show because nobody could come in at 4 a.m. So he was like, "Hey man, do you think you could be a running guest on my show just until I find somebody?" And I had a name called the Uber Man-Child on WPRK, which I did.
Wait, you've shared so much good information with them. First, how did you get to be, were you always a musician?
I was a musician.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I want to be an entertainer, an all-around storyteller, an entertainer, a man of many traits. I don't want to just be one thing. I want to be like the Dick Van Dyke of today. You know, I could sing, I could dance.
Such a great reference for a young person.
Thank you.
Dick Van Dyke, guys. I know most of you think that's the guy who appeared at the end of Mary Poppins Returns, but he's been around a really long time and a big talent in the industry.
Oh yeah, I want to be able to entertain, dance, sing, play music, produce things, be a wonderful host, an all-around entertainer. You know, and be able to encapsulate you with the words I'm trying to project to you.
So did you give performances as a kid? Were you one of those people who said, I got to put on a show?
Yeah.
I were? Okay, good.
I was. I would always go to me and my friends, my little 4 friends I had, and I would always try to come up with little character acts and plays. Like, we would make action scenes where we would take sticks, and we would try to copy Star Wars and Lord of the Rings at the time, and we would just like make these epic scenes and dialogues, and I was always like, no, I was kind of the little director, you know, trying to say, no, the line's not right, no, you're not walking here right, why are you using that prop, it's not the time. So I was always like that.
You were born to be in this industry then.
Yeah.
And born to be a director, a creator.
Yes.
A director is, that's more one-sided. You're a creator of things.
Yes.
So how do you graduate from playing lead guitar, then rhythm guitar, playing in a band? You're doing a show at 4 a.m. I love
7.
that. I mean, come on. There's so many of these shows. What's great about today is that you can watch them when you want to. I don't know if it was like that back then. You can listen to them when you want to.
Yes. WPRK, that was the station I was on. So it was 4 to 7.
Is that like the one from
Rollins
in
College.
Cincinnati? Do you remember that show, Boris?
Yes,
KRP in Cincinnati.
Which he was
had
telling
that
me
hottie
about.
Lonnie Anderson on it.
He told me somewhat about that when I mentioned WPRK. He's like, is that the same thing? I'm like, no, not really.
We're a one joke friends and family here. So you're on the show. What was it about being on a podcast? That was a podcast, correct?
No, this was a radio show.
Oh, it was a
on
radio
WPRK.
show. That's right. People always say, "I love your radio show" to me, and that always tells me their age. They're Titanic survivors. Then you've got the people who say, "I love your podcast," and I think that's close enough. I'll take it.
Yes.
So a radio show is a little different though than a podcast.
Very much so.
So talk about that, because I think people get confused on the platforms.
The platform.
You've got Facebook Live, which is what I do. You've got podcast, which is what Chris does. He interviews. And then you've got radio, which is a whole different genre. And then you've got TV. There's so many things. How do you differentiate for them?
For radio and podcasting are two different beasts, because radio, you have a set segment, you have a set time lot, and you have certain things you have to do for sponsors, or the radio won't allow certain words to be on or certain topics to be on, and you really have to walk a fine line, and you have to come up with something every week. It needs to hit every time. So with my segment I was the Uber Man-Child's live updates, because I was always riding my bike.
I love that.
I know.
So good.
It's amazing. Thank you, Benny G, for that one. And I would just always have live updates about what's going on in the city, what's happening, what I've seen while riding on my bike around these trails along Katy Way and the Florida Trail. And I would tell people what was going on, the buzz of the city, because there would be many things going on. People wouldn't even have an idea
No
that
clue.
they were there. No. And I'm the same way. Sometimes I don't have an idea about things, and that was my whole thing.
I have no clue every day, Chris, so we're golden.
Yeah. And with podcasting, it's more free. You have a lot of creative control. You can make whatever it is you want out of it. You could have many topics. You could talk about nuclear fission. You could talk about the dumbest thing, how to cut cucumbers. It could be anything.
It's true.
And you could edit it, you could cut it, you could make it sound however you want. And you could either choose to not release it, or you can release it, which is way different from radio, because it has to be released that date. You have to follow that format, like I mentioned. And with the live like this, which I'm a little new to, but I'm not unfamiliar with being in the camera.
Well, you're still looking straight ahead at the camera, so you're golden. You can be on it, trust me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. With how the live like this works is you're on the spot. You somewhat have to know what you're talking about, and maybe coach yourself a little bit with the host, just to kind of get your feet wet and not trip yourself up.
Right.
And with my background being on radio, kind of being on the spot with structure and my podcast, it gave me an opportunity to kind of just jump into this a little more easier. And I understand the format a little more, and your format interests me a lot with the live.
Well, the reason that I like live is it's one and done. I would OCD edit that video until there was no picture of me and maybe no picture of you. There might have been a minute of sound. I'm afraid of that. The reason I like this is when I hit the finish button at the bottom, it's finished, it's done, it's over. We've been authentic, we're good. I see the value, though, in having a podcast, because I believe that there are people want to, even though you can hear me, people want to listen to whatever topic is important to them. And this, if you're not into this, if you're driving home, if you're whatever you're doing when you're listening to your podcast, seeing a video can be more labor intensive than listening to a podcast. So how did you come up with the idea for yours? How did you come up with the idea for the experience with Chris Fio?
It was actually an idea I was mulling over for quite a little while, because I always had the idea of being in my own podcast, doing my own thing, because I was a part of 3 different podcasts, which I'll say were kind of messy, really messy, and sometimes I wouldn't have the control that I was promised, and it just kind of disgruntled me from kind of being a part of group podcasts, as they would call them, banter podcasts.
Well, when you're a creative person like you are, it can be very difficult when you're not in charge of that creative process.
Very much so. It's a tick. It's a very strong tick, and that's why I'm doing this on my own, because I saw an opportunity to make something of my own, and I was like, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to really go about the format of it? And it's been almost a 2-year process to kind of think this over and flesh it out in my own head. And when I met Boris over at Peter Von Taborski's live event, hello Peter, if you're watching, I love you. You're a wonderful man. Thank you for introducing us. I started to get the idea that he is more in depth than I thought when he started talking about. He had a podcast, and he was really enthusiastic about starting one with me. And a thing clicked in here where I'm like, you know what? Jump into this opportunity. He seems like he can help me. He has his head on together so far from what I see. And
are we talking about Boris?
We're talking about
I'm kidding,
how we
Boris.
met. Boris with an embarrassing look on his face.
Boris wants to kill me right now. No, I agree. I think that that's so good, but at least you had the wherewithal. You had the experience, and we've got a question. Justin, I'll ask it in a minute. You had the experience from your time on radio. You had done 3 messy podcasts, and honestly, all that we do kind of is messy, even if we have producers and things. There's something cool about that from a creative process, but you don't want messy where you're not in control.
Exactly.
Totally different. And then, so you jump in with Boris. How did you come up with the title for the experience?
It was originally, I wanted to call it like the Comfy Corner with Chris Fioravanti. It just didn't hit like what I'm trying to do right.
Because I love the title.
Yeah.
I really do love the title.
Thank
I think
you.
It's good.
And
really
it was a very mold out title because we were just really trying to pinpoint it. It was a long brainstorm. Just the title really mattered to me. Like the title is going to dictate how the show is going to be viewed.
Kyle Eagle.
And Kyle Eagle as well.
I love Kyle.
I know.
Kyle's
he
amazing.
He helped out with the name actually. He's the one who abridged my last name to why don't we call it The Experience with Chris Fio? Because we were originally supposed to call it Chris Fioravanti's Experience, but Kyle didn't like.
I love Chris Fio. I think that's. And I want to talk about the change in the name. Let me ask Justin's question.
Okay.
Would you say you stepped out of your comfort zone initially?
All the time. Every time I'm about to conduct an interview or be interviewed or go on a photo shoot or meet and greet, I'm stepping out all the time.
Is that because, are you, that's a great question, Justin. Are you an introvert at heart? Are you an extrovert? I'm amazed sometimes that people say, I'm really an introvert, Ted, but I make myself be an extrovert.
I would say yes. I'm an introverted extrovert. Like I get my energy from kind of gathering myself, being in an isolated space, just kind of meditate a little bit. Then I go out to expend that energy and really, gather what I need, make friends, people who I want to be, like-mindedness of people, and use that energy for something positive. And then I go back, I meditate, I gather my energy to myself and try to redistribute that outwards and really get a hold on what I'm doing. That's how I do it. Because I tried it the other way. I try to be extrovert and introvert. I try to just be out there all the time.
Right.
It exhausted me.
It's exhausting.
Very
I mean,
much so.
anybody. It's exhausting for an extrovert too. Trust me. All right, so let me ask you about the process because you and I are similar, I believe, in this. I don't do any prep. I normally know how to pronounce my guest name, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes
you did a surprising
well,
work
I'm part
with my
Italian,
name.
but it wasn't
Okay.
perfect. Chris Fio is much easier, so I
Yes.
love that Kyle came up. I think that's brilliant.
It is.
But you don't prep. You have a 45-minute interview.
Yes.
And you don't have any kind of preconceived notion about what you're going to talk about.
No.
You feed off the energy and what's going on in the actual conversation and the dialogue.
Yes.
To talk about it, because people are amazed that can happen. I have people that won't come on the show, or I won't let them on the show because they want to give me their 10 best questions to talk about, and I'm always like, okay, that's never going to happen because I'm not going to have a sheet in front of me, and I'm not going to remember a thing about that.
Right.
That also makes me distracted as the host. Then I'm worried about I covered 8 of them, I didn't cover 10 of them.
Right.
So talk about the process, how that goes with you. You sit down with somebody, it's the first time. We can talk about Harold, for example, who
Right.
I love, Harold Guard. How do you continue for 45 minutes? How do you engage in a dialogue with them? What's going through your mind?
I usually start off with small talk, like either with, hello, I'm here with, like my last guest, with Rick Emerson of the Entering the Black Hole. How are you doing today, Rick? How's your day been? Start out with something like that, and they'll go off from that, and I'll banter with them just a little bit, not to where I'm taking attention off of them, but I ask probing questions behind every question, behind every answer they give me. I'll pick a spot out of whatever they're saying that really interests me, that I feel like I need to probe that a little more, because that's going to go into a deeper rabbit hole that I would want to have on my show,
Right.
and for them to make this interview really good. And that's how I go. I try to go off the energy that they're giving me. I try to feed off it. And most of the time, whenever I have my guests, they're just right there. The questions are right there, and I could just grab those out of the ether and then go deeper into the questions I need to ask them. And I'll just sometimes outright ask them a tough question. Like, would you say your mental health or the disability you have has helped you or impaired you with
Right.
what you're doing?
Right.
I'll ask tough questions. Like with Anwar, he mentioned that I wasn't afraid to approach tough questions. Like, we talked about race and his religion, and he was really shocked that I was able to just ask these, well, because I'm genuinely interested.
That's the thing. So the authenticity, the vulnerability, and the genuine interest, I think, is so critical when you are, not just for what we do, but when you're having a conversation with any other human being. I want to encourage you guys, you just have to ask, and from the heart. There are ways to engage people without being combative, and I think we've lost that art. We either know our position and then we're combative. We don't know how to just ask out of genuine curiosity. When I had on guests, I had one who my friend David Swanson, who I told you about, and then I had Jim Hobart on, who atheist declared on his page, and there was no difficulty there. Why? Because my questions were coming from a real place of wanting to understand what each person was thinking. Thanks, Shirley. And if you come at that, like obviously you have a gift for it, then people want to engage with you. So when we come at people, when we come out swinging, that's when you see all of those nasty comments on Facebook and social media and in the news and in any conversation. You can't even talk about the sky being blue because the next person's going to argue that it's really green. You just have to come from a good place.
Yeah, and it's natural to us now because we've been able to practice and hone it.
Yeah,
it's not something you
true.
can just go straight out and then do this. You have to be able to ask questions, like you say, in a way that's not combative. You have to be able to ask tough questions in a way to where they will actually answer it instead of just being like, so, you are this, and this. Tell us why. That's really aggressive, and people tend to close up. So what I try to do is I try to be softer in my tough questions. I try to just ask it in a way where if I'm going, like with race, so Anwar, you have a daughter. How would you feel about the political climate going on now with your daughter being a young black youth and how things are going with young black youth nowadays?
And I want to know that answer. That's a question I think that's really important.
Yes.
I want to get a perspective because if we're being honest, the majority of us who are in social media doing things, we really do want to get a perspective. I want to be educated on stuff that I don't know about. I want to have a better idea so that if I have a quote-unquote position on something, it's an educated position and not something that I've just read and it sounded good. So what a great question. I love Anwar, by the way.
Yeah,
Hi,
he's
Anwar.
an awesome guy.
I love that question, and I like that it was thought out because you're just asking what he's feeling at that moment.
Yeah.
And for people to challenge other people's feelings is a little more difficult. If you say, this is how I feel, and you pose the question that way, and I think people in general, it would be lovely if we could ask instead of telling them how they're supposed to feel.
Exactly.
Or giving them their point and telling them how they're feeling. Then you're really not interested. All right, so what are the short-term, long-term goals and things that you want to accomplish with the experience with Chris Fio?
The short-term goal is to really get the name out there. Like, everybody wants to be on the show. I mean, it sounds a bit selfish, but who isn't selfish when it comes to running a show like that? I want big names to come on the show, not really big names right now. The short-term goal is just to get local big names and highlight local people, in these certain genres. And that's where the big term goal comes in. I want people to understand, that there are things out there you may not understand from your own biases and prejudices. And I'm trying to knock down that wall. I'm trying to, like, when I interviewed the artistic director for Orlando Ballet, he even said on his show, people like you, most of the time will think ballet is just glittery frou-frou things.
Right.
I'm like, yes, that's originally what I thought before I spoke to you like this. I didn't realize that you all are athletes and that, making things look effortless is the hardest thing to do. And that's the type of things I want to highlight is stuff like that. And with Harold Guard, really people in my generation don't know what abstract expressionism is. And when I interviewed him, people were just like, wow, they really like the art. They didn't realize there was stuff like that out there. And that's the big term goal with my show, is to highlight these things.
I love that. All right, Justin asked another question. What outlets do you seek insight or opinions from? That's a great question because I think that traditional media is a difficult place to get any kind of real information. It's very hard to disseminate and maneuver through the minutia of what's real and what isn't, no matter what quote-unquote side of the fence you're on. Thank you, Steve. So where do you go? Where do you go for your information?
I look to my peers, really. I listen to my peers. People are doing what I'm doing. Ask them how they approach certain topics or certain things, or how they get to a certain place in their career or what they're doing. I want to know, because the better you can learn from your peers better than anybody else. Like you said, traditional media is one of the hardest things to get your information from. That's true, and it's also because that I think traditional media is in a fight right now with the new wave that podcasting is.
So true.
It is. It's like a gold rush of podcasting here in Orlando, and I've said this in my interview with Anwar. Now's the time to make it look good. Now's the time to make it sound good and to put it out there and make it serious.
And I think that they're podcasting, like, so my age group, I'm 35. My age group, 40 and
You look
over,
great.
will go, yeah, right? I mean, I look good for 80. My age group, we don't understand that that's what podcasting is for. So give them a little background. So podcasting, if you're 45, a podcast, people are like, oh my God, first of all, I don't even know how to listen to that. How am I going to do that? What am I going to, how am I ever going to pay attention to them for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour? Talk about the value that you're trying to bring.
What I'm trying to bring is, like, people, I want you to listen to it like you're listening to an NPR radio station. I want you to be able to go in your car, put on maybe listen to a 20-minute segment of my show, and when you come back from work, you listen to another 20 minutes. You get your information there quick and fast. You listen to the interview that I've conducted and the show that I have for you. So it's not overwhelming. You're not sitting there with 2.5 hours of things to catch up on where you're like, I got to listen to this tomorrow. It's overwhelming, first off. And podcasting gave me that freedom to really dictate how long I need to make this. And if you don't know where to find podcasts, there's many apps that you could go to. There's Apple Tunes, there's Spreaker, Podbean, there's a bunch of venues that you can go to listen to these things. And what a podcast is, if you don't know it or you're just now introduced to podcasting, is it's basically people coming together to talk about topics that they find interest in or create awareness on certain things they see. Because there's a lot of PSA podcasts out there to highlight certain
Very much
events. And that's another benefit of podcasting. You get the immediate attention out to it. You could put it out here. You don't have to deal with editors. You don't have to deal with, your production company, say you can't do this. No, if you have a message, it's going to allow you to put that out there, whatever it may be.
I love that. All right, Steve, the name of Chris's show is The Experience with Chris Fio, and we'll tag that when we finish the show. I did not tag that earlier, but I promise you I will tag it when we're done. You were talking about the multiple streams, iTunes. There's so many places to go, and that brings up a question. So much like any industry, all of a sudden everybody decided they're a podcaster.
Yes.
And my favorite is, look, I've just launched my podcast. I'm on iTunes and la 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 la, and I'm like, oh my God, you can't speak in public. How is this even going to happen? But now you're a podcaster.
Yes.
So how is that? First of all, tell me a little bit about, just a teeny bit about that process, because I want to know, is it that easy for people to get on iTunes with a podcast?
It's not really easy
I
sometimes.
mean, but sometimes I have to tell you, because of my experience with some of these people, they can't even hand out a business card without shaking. So and maybe that's a different thing, because I get it. It's a different medium. It's a different
I
platform.
feel like they're trying to grow in a way. I feel like they may have a quota they have to meet before they really weed all that out.
Yes, you can find it on Apple, iTunes, right? And again, where can you find the podcast?
The podcast doesn't come out till February 2020, but it will be released on all platforms.
What about your interviews? Your interviews, it's all waiting till then.
Yes, all waiting till then.
See, we have this launch show, which is, Boris probably wants to punch me right now. We have this launch show. This is a big deal that we're talking about it now.
Yes.
Because it's coming to you, and you've already done how many interviews?
I've done 7 interviews so far. I've conducted interviews with Nina Strike of the Global Peace Film Festival.
Amazing.
I've had an interview with Anwar Superstar, the brother of Mos Def, Harold Gord, as I mentioned before, Josh Brink, the author who wrote a graphic novel about a screenplay Salvador Dali wrote for the Marx Brothers.
Nice.
And
Oh my God.
that was a very
That's
cool interview.
awesome. That's a combo.
And it was actually a combination interview that day. It was a special episode of Kiss My Art where me and Kyle Eagle were both interviewing this guy.
I love it.
I know it was a great visual, a great picture we took on there, which I have on my Facebook page. Come and visit it and give it a like.
Which the Facebook page is the experience with Chris Fio.
Yes.
And again, we'll share that link when we're finished. I have to know, what is it hard for you to sit on this? Is it hard for you to be doing your interviews and knowing that it will be a little bit before people can actually hear about them? I mean, this is your baby, you're birthing it.
I thought it was, at first it was difficult for me to grasp that. I was so eager to put it out now, do it now. If no one hears it, no one will give it any, credence. No one will, bother listening to it. But then I was mulling over the idea when Kyle said, let's wait a year to put this out, really make it sound and look good. He was saying, I'll put some, of my, overdubs on it to introduce the show, break the show, and end the show, which I thought was a really good idea.
That's awesome.
And I don't regret waiting on this, because how we're building this show up has been very beneficial, and I feel like this was the right way to do this.
And you're built, so yes, the answer is Steve, yes, podcasts are available on Android as well.
Yes, they are.
I think the way that you all have decided to build this is the good way. Because like I was telling you before, I could meet someone, they have launched their Facebook page, and all of a sudden they're a podcaster.
Right.
And I know you have to figure out the snake oil salesman versus the people who are really doing it.
Yeah.
And I love that you're sitting on it, you're building it, and you're also honing, like you mentioned earlier, honing your craft.
Yeah.
Because we were talking, Boris and Chris and I earlier, about my first episode, and I saw Gert Garman come on, she popped on for a minute. Episode 1 is completely different than episode 401, I can tell you. It's got a different feel. I'm not all sunshine, unicorns, and rainbows. We're having a real conversation. You progress, you evolve. You have to, and so that's awesome that you're having a chance to do that. And I would imagine even with editing, show 1 is going to be different than the last show you make or the last podcast you do prior to launch.
And that's a beauty of this whole podcasting industry that's booming right now, is you get to see growth. And that's what my podcast tries to highlight, is the growth of my first interview I conducted and the first picture I took of this show and project to now, to what I'm doing. You see the growth of how I, really molded myself into the show, where I knew where it was going to take me. And just like how you said, from the first episode, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We're having real conversations, and I feel like it's molding in that way. I know it's molding that way, matter of fact. And people are coming to us because they see the growth themselves, and I want them to be a part of that growth as well. And that's the beauty about podcasting. It gives everyone a chance to be a part of the growth.
You have the buzz, though. Like, you don't, because you're drinking tea. You have the buzz in Orlando. That's also a good thing. And so keeping that, people have heard about your interviews. I know that I have heard about them not just from Boris, and that's the truth, because we don't BS on this show. The great thing about it is I've heard your name from multiple people, and I love the fact that I hear that, and yet you don't have a product out yet. There's nothing released. You're just doing your thing, going about and building up that buzz. I think it's so critical. I think people just jump into things too quickly, and then everything peters out. It all just fades. And then they take a look at your first show, and they go, well, that wasn't so good, Ted Bogert. Which is why I had to do a show every day to improve myself instead of doing it monthly or weekly.
Right.
But I love that you're creating that buzz. Now, you weren't born here?
Oh, yes, I was born and raised in Orlando.
Oh, you were born and raised. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Timber Creek High School over in Avalon.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. You're my kid's age.
Yeah.
I went to Colonial High School.
My older brother went to Colonial as well.
No way.
Yeah.
So I love that. So you know that our community is very embraceful of these things that we're doing, especially a homegrown person that understands the market. We are a very close-knit community, especially those of us that do anything downtown, charitable, philanthropic, in the arts. We actually all know each other. It's kind of a crazy little world.
It is.
And I love that, though, because I think we are so much better power in numbers, power in coming together and being more team-oriented and community-oriented. So what What is the launch date? February.
February of 2020.
Right, Boris? Is that okay to say? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
I know.
I don't want to get killed by the manager, Leo.
He's not only my manager, but he's an awesome mentor to me.
We got it. So let's talk a little bit about mentor. Wait, I didn't even look at time. See, I'm already going past. All right. So we're going to share all of Chris's contact information, how you can reach out to him, how you can learn more about the experience with Chris Fio. So share a mentor. We talk about mentorship is so critical. If you're not a mentor to somebody, try to remember a time where somebody mentored you, took a chance on you, helped you, supported you, and then go out and be that person for someone else. And so we're big about that at the TED Show and TED's community. Can you give us an idea of a mentor who's helped you, maybe somebody who past, present, or somebody who's really made an impact on you?
I've got a couple people. One that's in the past was my godfather, Tony, God rest his soul. Yeah, he died from liver cancer, unfortunately. Wow. He was a wonderful man. He was the man who went to school for fun. If he would graduate and get an honor, he would get a degree in something, and he would just go back just to learn more. He was that type of guy.
I would have liked Tony very much.
You would. He was a wonderful man, wonderful spirit, traveled all over. He was just taken before his time. You know, he was a wonderful influence. He taught me a lot of things that I should know that I actually utilize right now.
I love that.
And we'll fast forward today with Boris. This man, I've never seen anybody work this hard for me or help me or teach me this much about things I may not have looked at myself in the mirror or denied. He is put up to my face. And like, look at this. You might want to work on this, Chris. I'm not saying, do it now or forcing you, but I'm just saying you might want to work on this. And you need someone like that who's going to give you these small criticisms here and there about certain flaws that may stumble you greatly in the future. And that's what he's been doing for me. He's also been working on getting me getting my project, off the ground. And that's one thing I really thank him for, is just really putting in that hard work and being a really great backing for me. And Kyle Eagle as well, he's a wonderful mentor. He taught me so much about how to be a proper journalist in a way and be a proper interviewer. He mentioned to me that one thing that always stick out of my mind is that you as an interviewer have to be on time, but your interviewee could be as late as they want. And they're just so wonderful to me. And if you should take a chance on somebody like they did to me, because of what they're doing for me and how I'm trying to help them get me to where I want to go.
Right.
It's a synergetic relationship. He's helping me, but I have to help him help me.
That's true.
And that's what you need to find. So there's all these young, bright people like me out there that are just aching to get something done. And you can be that person to get it done with them. And they could bring you along too, just by you helping them. And Boris, I gotta say thank you. He's off screen right now, but I thank him 1,000,000% for just taking.
He's one of the good guys.
He is. He really is. And sometimes I would just sit back and think, wow, this man is really fighting for me. He's really just helping me in ways and just talking to me like a mentor. And really, he is my mentor, and I really thank him for that.
That's awesome. See, it's good to say that stuff out loud, by the way, which is why I make my guests comfortable or uncomfortable talk about their mentor, because we don't say it out loud enough. It's not that we don't feel it, it's just that it's just not the norm. We don't thank people. We certainly don't get an opportunity to thank them publicly. So if you aren't a mentor to somebody right now, think about how you can be, because it's really, really, really important. All right, thanks for being on the show today, buddy. You were amazing. I love it. Thank you, Boris, for always supporting me and the TED Show. He's the best. He and Marla E. will be on this week. Very excited to have them on for one big reveal. Big reveal. We love you guys so much. Thank you for supporting us and the TED Show. Almost 2 years, 2 years on Wednesday. We'll see you soon. Follow Chris. Get out there. Go to his Facebook page. Follow him. We'll share all that contact information later. Thanks,
Please
man.
do.
We love you guys.
Thank you for having me on, Ted.
Thank you.